Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. May God bless your day and the entire week ahead. May you find clarity and, purpose in whatever challenges you're facing right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important to start with that grounding, I think.
It really is. And we're going to need that grounding today because, we're jumping straight into a story that it's just wild.
Oh, it defies all logic.
Right. So I want you, the listener, to imagine a tactical scenario that completely ignores all military common sense. You're the commander of an ancient army.
A very large ancient army.
Exactly. Hundreds of thousands of people. And
Yeah.
you've just achieved the impossible. You crossed a major river, the Jordan, right into a hostile territory.
And not just any territory. You are staring down Jericho.
Yes, Jericho.
Hmm?
Your target is looming right in front of you, and it is terrifying. We're talking about Tel Sultan, which is one of the oldest fortified cities on Earth,
Yeah, with these massive, solid stone walls, like 1.5 meters thick.
and monumental defensive towers. But here's the catch. The enemy knows you're there, but they are absolutely paralyzed by panic.
Yeah.
You have the ultimate element of surprise.
Which is a commander's dream, right?
Exactly. The obvious military maneuver is to strike instantly, hit them while they're terrified. But instead, you order a mass, debilitating surgical procedure for your entire fighting force.
Which leaves them completely bedridden, right in the shadow of those enemy walls.
It makes zero sense. So unpacking the why behind that suicidal strategy is our mission today. We are exploring the bizarre sequence of events in Joshua chapter 5.
And we have some amazing sources for this deep dive.
We do. We're utilizing the extensive study notes from two heavyweight resources today, the Holman Study Bible and the NAA, which is the Nova Almeida Atualizada.
Yeah, that's a highly respected Portuguese translation study Bible. The notes in there are just fantastic.
They really are. Between those two sources, we're going to look at the psychological warfare, this crazy economic collapse of the Israelite camp, and the intense archaeological debates surrounding this exact moment.
So, to really grasp the timing of this mass surgery, the circumcision, we have to look at the psychological state of the Canaanites first.
Right. Because otherwise, the Israelites would have just been slaughtered in their tents.
Exactly. The notes from our sources unpack this brilliantly. In the very first verse, it tells us that when the Amorite and Canaanite kings heard about the Israelites crossing the river, their hearts melted.
Their hearts melted. I mean, we usually read that as just a poetic way of saying they were scared.
Yeah, like they got cold feet. But in the ancient Near Eastern mindset, the heart isn't just about emotion. It's the seat of the will, the intellect.
Oh, wow. So it's not just fear.
No, their actual strategic will to fight literally dissolved. It's a complete psychological collapse.
And there's a really cool reversal there, right? Because decades earlier, it was the Israelites whose hearts melted.
Yes. Back in chapter 2, and even earlier in their history, the Israelites were the ones terrified of the giants in the land. Now, the tables have completely turned.
It's a total literary and psychological flip.
It is. The Canaanites are experiencing this total paralysis of command. They just retreat behind their massive walls and lock the gates.
Which is wild because if they had any tactical sense at all, they would have attacked the Israelites on the riverbanks, like while they were disorganized from crossing.
Exactly. But their paralysis creates this artificial, really fragile window of safety.
Which Joshua immediately uses to completely incapacitate his own men. God commands him to make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites.
Right there in enemy territory.
I mean, think about it. This is like a football team making to the Super Bowl. They're standing in the tunnel, ready to run out onto the field, and the coach suddenly says, "All right, everyone, time for knee surgery."
That is exactly what it's like. It's tactical suicide.
So why on earth do this now? Even with the enemy paralyzed, the risk is astronomical. A counterattack would wipe out the entire nation.
Well, because taking the land was never just a military conquest. I mean, the sources make this very clear. It was a theological inheritance.
Okay, unpack that a bit. What's the historical context here?
So the entire generation of fighting men that originally came out of Egypt, the ones who rebelled and refused to trust God, they died in the wilderness.
Right, they wandered for 40 years.
Yeah. So the army currently standing outside Jericho, they're a completely new generation. They were born in the desert. And for those 40 years, the practice of circumcision had been totally abandoned.
Oh, I see. So they are biologically and, covenantally disconnected from the promises made to Abraham.
Exactly. Technically, they're just a wandering militia at this point. They can't inherit the land as this secular nomadic horde. They have to inherit it as the covenant people of God.
So the physical act of circumcision is the strict prerequisite for the spiritual inheritance.
Precisely. But the details of how this was actually carried out are fascinating, especially the tools they used.
Yeah, the flint knives. I wanted to ask about that because it sounds so primitive to a modern ear. Like, why not
Yeah.
use bronze or iron? They definitely had metalworking back then.
They did, but the NWA notes draw attention to this specific command to use flint or obsidian knives. And there's a real medical reason for it.
Really, a medical reason for using rocks.
Yeah. Because obsidian and flint, when they're knapped correctly, they create an edge that is actually sharper than modern steel scalpels.
Wait, sharper than a modern scalpel.
Oh, absolutely. When you flake obsidian, it breaks down to a single molecule at the edge. The sources even point to these Egyptian tombs from the 23rd century BC that depict mass circumcisions.
Using these exact stone blades.
Yep. They found depictions of 120 young men being circumcised with obsidian. In the ancient world, an obsidian blade produced a much cleaner cut.
Oh, so it heals faster.
Way faster. And it carried a significantly lower risk of infection than, porous, unrefined bronze would have.
That is just a brilliant intersection of a ritual command and ancient medical reality,
Yeah.
because you are operating on hundreds of thousands of men in a dusty encampment.
Yeah, you really need the cleanest possible incision to prevent a camp-wide sepsis outbreak.
Man, that's incredible. And this mass healing takes place at a location that God actually renames, right? He calls it Gilgal.
Right, and there's some great Hebrew wordplay happening there. The root of Gilgal is the verb galal, which means to roll.
To roll, okay?
Yeah, so God tells Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you."
The reproach of Egypt. That is such a loaded phrase. I mean, I always just read that as the shame of having been slaves for so long.
It definitely includes that. But the study notes push it further into the sociological reality of the ancient Near East. It wasn't just internal shame.
What else was it?
It was external mockery, especially from Egypt. I mean, imagine the Egyptian narrative for the last 4 decades. They're probably saying, look at these people. Their God led them into a wasteland just to wander in circles and die.
So they were the laughingstock of the ancient world, a completely humiliated people.
Exactly. They were living under the massive shadow of their parents' colossal failures. But by crossing the Jordan and taking on this physical mark of the covenant,
That narrative is violently shattered.
completely, God is definitively stating that the era of displacement is over. Rolling away the reproach is this massive identity shift. They aren't a people in timeout anymore.
I love that. Not in timeout anymore. And that identity shift really acts like a domino, doesn't it? It sets off the next massive event in the chapter.
Oh, for sure. Because they are officially a covenant people again, they are now legally permitted to observe the Passover.
Right, which they do on the 14th day of the month while they're recovering in their tents. And the sources point out this incredible structural symmetry here.
Yeah, scholars often call this moment the second Exodus.
The parallels are just undeniable. I mean, think about the original Exodus out of Egypt.
Oh.
It was initiated by the Passover, the blood on the doorpost.
Right, and that was immediately followed by the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea.
Exactly. But here, the sequence is perfectly mirrored, just flipped. They have the miraculous crossing of the Jordan River first, and that is immediately capped off by the celebration of the Passover.
It's a perfect narrative bookend. It formally closes the chapter on their displacement. But observing that Passover in the Promised Land triggers a really severe shock to the entire camp.
An economic shock, the end
Yeah.
of the manna.
Yeah.
I mean, for 40 straight years, the entire economy of Israel was based on a daily, localized miracle. Just bread on the ground 6 days a week, feeding millions of people.
It was their entire survival system.
And the text tells us that on the day after the Passover, they eat the produce of the land unleavened bread and roasted grain. And then the very next day, the manna just stops.
It doesn't taper off either. It doesn't slowly decrease over a few months to let them, adjust to agriculture.
It just ceases completely. Think about the psychological trauma that morning. You wake up, you unzip your tent, and the supernatural safety net that has sustained your entire existence is just gone.
It's terrifying.
If you want to eat today, you have to forage, harvest, or basically steal from hostile territory.
Yeah.
It forces this immediate transition from passive dependence to aggressive active survival.
The sources really emphasize that this cessation marks the harsh biological reality of maturity. Manna was life support for refugees.
Right.
But you don't keep a healthy adult on an IV drip.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. It reminds me of graduating from college and your parents suddenly cutting off your allowance.
Yes, it's exactly like that. It's scary because the daily miracle is gone, but it's actually a sign of arrival. God's provision didn't end, it just shifted mediums.
The supernatural bread from heaven was replaced by the natural abundance of Canaan. But getting that new provision requires intense labor and, frankly, extreme risk.
Which perfectly explains why Joshua is out scouting near Jericho.
Hmm.
The logistical pressure on him right now must be unimaginable.
He has a massive civilian population that suddenly has no food source, and he's staring at an impenetrable fortress. Jericho isn't just a military target anymore. It's a literal obstacle to their daily survival.
And it's in that context, this intense pressure staring at those walls, that Joshua experiences the most disorienting encounter of his entire life.
Yeah, so he looks up, and a man is standing opposite him with a drawn sword.
And in the ancient biblical context, an angelic being appearing with a drawn sword is not there to negotiate.
The sources cross-reference this with similar encounters in Numbers and 1 Chronicles.
They do. The drawn sword signifies an agent of God's zeal. It is a posture of imminent lethal action.
So Joshua, who is a military man through and through, sees a potential threat with a weapon drawn. And he asks the only logical question a general can ask: are you for us or for our enemies?
He's trying to categorize this being into his existing tactical framework, friend or foe.
Right, which makes total sense. But the response he gets just shatters that framework entirely.
Completely shatters it. The man replies, neither. Or, in some translations, simply no.
No, I mean, this is the theological linchpin of the whole chapter for me. Because if I am Joshua, my brain breaks here.
How could it not?
Think about it. God just brought us across the river. God just renewed the covenant with us. We just ate the Passover. Shouldn't God, by absolute definition, be on our side?
That assumption is exactly what the commander is dismantling. He identifies himself stating, I am the commander of the army of the Lord.
And by answering neither, what is he really saying?
He is directly challenging the ancient Near Eastern concept of a nationalistic deity. In that era, gods were highly territorial mascots.
Like Chemosh fighting for Moab or Molech fighting for Ammon?
Exactly. If your nation went to war, your god went to war for you. It was a given.
So Joshua is assuming that Yahweh is just Israel's version of a mercenary god. Like, this is my army, my campaign, and you are here as my supernatural reinforcement.
But the God of Israel is an independent variable. He doesn't just ally with human agendas. The commander is essentially telling Joshua, I am not here to join your army. You are here to join mine.
Wow. You are here to join mine.
God is not a tool to be leveraged for Israel's geopolitical ambitions. He demands total submission. It's not about whether God is on Joshua's side, but whether Joshua is on God's side.
That completely flips the hierarchy. And you see Joshua realize it instantly. He drops the general act, falls face down in the dirt, and asks, what does my Lord say to his servant?
And the commander's instruction there is deeply significant. He says, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy.
Which forces anyone reading this text to immediately think of Moses at the burning bush.
It is the exact same command. Both of our study sources stress this parallel heavily. It is the definitive commissioning of Joshua as Moses' equal and true successor.
But consider the geography of this holy ground compared to Moses. Moses was in a remote, quiet desert when he encountered the divine.
Right, he was totally isolated.
But Joshua is standing in the dirt, practically within bowshot of enemy walls, surrounded by the tension of an impending siege.
God declares a war zone to be a sanctuary.
Yes. And that brings us to the physical reality of what Joshua was actually looking at when he was standing barefoot in that dirt. Because it's so easy to treat Jericho as just a metaphor for our personal struggles,
Yeah, we over-spiritualize it sometimes.
But the NWA Study Bible includes this phenomenal special insert detailing the hard archaeological facts of Tel Es-Sultan, the actual site of Jericho.
Which really grounds the theology in historical grit. Tel Es-Sultan sits in the Jordan Valley, roughly 229 meters below sea level.
And because it controlled a vital freshwater spring, it was heavily fortified long before the Israelites ever arrived.
Yeah, it's perhaps the oldest city on Earth. The insert traces a century of intense archaeological scrutiny there.
Right. You have Ernst Sullen and Karl Watzinger in the early 1900s, then John Garstang in the 1930s.
And Kathleen Kenyon in the 1950s.
And the structures they uncovered prove that the Israelite fear of cities with walls reaching to the sky was barely an exaggeration. What did they actually find?
Well, the excavations revealed these massive retaining walls holding up huge earthen ramparts, and those were topped with mud brick defensive walls. Some of the stone foundational structures were 1.5 meters thick. They even found a monumental round stone tower dating back to the Bronze Age.
So for an army of newly circumcised nomads who had spent their entire lives living in tents and eating manna,
Those fortifications would have looked utterly alien and totally impossible to breach.
but the sources also highlight that Jericho is the site of one of the most fierce ongoing debates in biblical archaeology, right?
Yes, the intense debate over the destruction layer. When Garstang excavated the site, he found this massive layer of collapsed walls and severely burned grain.
Burned grain, which he claimed aligned perfectly with the biblical account of Joshua's conquest.
Exactly. Because the burned grain specifically matches the biblical mandate that the Israelites were not allowed to plunder the city's food.
Oh, that's right. They were commanded to destroy everything and not take the spoils. So leaving incredibly valuable caloric resources to just burn, that perfectly fits the text.
It does. However, decades later, Kathleen Kenyon used more advanced stratigraphic techniques, and she dated that specific destruction layer much earlier.
Okay, so she argued the city was already essentially a ruin by the time Joshua would have arrived.
Right. And scholars have been fighting over pottery typologies and carbon dating there ever since. It's a relentless debate.
But the very existence of this intense academic scrutiny proves something important. It proves that Joshua chapter 5 isn't just existing in a realm of mythic bedtime stories.
No, it is intersecting with real geography, real stone walls, and the messy, tangible science of archaeology.
The theological epiphany Joshua has is happening while his feet are planted in actual contested dirt.
It really is.
But the progression of this entire chapter is just staggering when you lay it out through cause and effect.
It really builds on itself, doesn't it?
It does. The psychological collapse of the Canaanites provides the only tactical window for the mass circumcision. Then that physical healing and covenant renewal, biologically and legally, allows them to observe the Passover.
Right.
Eating the Passover in the land forces them to consume the local grain, which triggers the terrifying cessation of the manna. And then the sudden loss of that daily miracle forces Joshua out to scout the physical walls of Jericho.
Which leads directly to him standing barefoot before the commander of the Lord's army. It is a masterclass in the mechanics of preparation.
It really is. True preparation for facing an impossible obstacle didn't involve physical training or sharpening swords.
No. It involves stripping away the psychological crutches of the past and violently reorienting their identity and allegiance.
Which leaves us with a highly provocative thought to explore on our own as we wrap up this deep dive. Because we all have goals, obstacles, and our own versions of the promised land that we are trying to reach.
Absolutely.
But so often when we face massive obstacles, our first instinct is usually to ask God or the universe to just come be an assistant on our side. We are clinging to the manna in our lives, the safe, predictable systems, the institutional crutches, the allowances we rely on to survive.
We pray for the manna to continue, terrified of the day it stops.
Exactly. But what if losing that safety net is the strict prerequisite for actually taking the land? What if the path to victory actually requires us to drop our weapons, take off our shoes, and realize we aren't the ones in command?
That completely changes how we view sudden losses or shifts in our resources. Sometimes the harshest economic or emotional shock is the definitive proof that you have finally arrived.
A brilliant paradigm shift to end on. Thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this intense journey through the text.
Yes, thank you for diving deep with us.
We'll see you next time. And remember, God blesses all the listeners.